Welcome. My name is Josef Lensch. I am the CEO and co-founder of Partisan. Partisan is the new community platform for political professionals in Europe and beyond. And Partisan is also hosting the Political Tech Summit, which just took place for the first time in January 25 in Berlin and will take once again place in Berlin next year. Great to have you, everyone. We have 90 minutes. As I already said before we begin, we'll end sharp at 7 tonight because we know that your time is precious. So let me jump into the agenda. First, we'll have a keynote to kick things off from my co-founder and our Chief Program Officer, Ben Lepple, who's already in the call. Then we'll have a discussion with an esteemed panel, which I will introduce to you after the keynote. Everyone will have about 45 minutes for discussion. And of course, as we have a very good audience tonight with lots of very interesting people, great that you all have showed up. We are also looking forward to your questions and comments and inputs because we also know that many of you are experts and have been involved in one or another way also into the this or other campaigns. So there will be a Q&A and then we'll end at 7 p.m. CET, 90 minutes from now. All right, without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce my co-founder and our Chief Program Officer, Ben Lepple. Ben is a political data scientist and a consultant with more than 10 years of experience in advising political organizations. He's, I think it's fair to say, a data geek, and he, of course, has also followed the election closely. So he will frame tonight's discussion with a keynote of about 10 to 12 minutes before we then go into discussion. Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Joseph, and welcome everyone. Great to have you with us today. It's great to see that over 70 people are already participating in this webinar. I hope you can hear me because I've just plugged in my Rode mic. So sometimes there's a glitch, but I think you can hear me, right? Okay. Campaigns are no longer won solely through rallies or posters, you all know that, but they are fought online on TikTok feeds, in Telegram channels, and also through grassroots organizing. So I want to give you a glimpse into what we observed during the German election, which basically concluded the world's biggest election year, the super election year 2024, although it took place in 2025. You all know the outcome. The CDU won the Bundestagswahl, the German election, but it was the populist radical left and the far right who gained the most during the last couple of weeks leading to the election day. The AfD gained more than 10%, while Die Linke surged. Throughout the campaign, the AfD and the Linke dominated the digital space. On the left, you can see a great illustration from Project Sparta of the University of the Federal Armed Forces that gives you an overview over YouTube, X, Twitter, and TikTok. And for the first time since 2020, another party managed to overtake the AfD on TikTok. It was Die Linke. But Die Linke is not a centrist party, it is also a radical party. So social media became a funhouse mirror of reality, because still the centrist forces in Germany gained more than 2/3 or approximately 2/3 of the total vote. The true offline distribution of opinion, though, thus no longer mirrors what's going on online, and we call this the invisibility of moderate opinions online. This is something Claire Robertson and colleagues found out in a study they did in 2024 as part of an ongoing series of papers at the NYU Social Media Lab. The success of the AfD and Die Linke was mostly powered by organic reach, not ad budgets. And as you can see, that especially the Greens were trying to win the fight online with more than 7,000 ads on Meta's platforms alone. But as you can see in the left graph, they weren't really successful with that. They spent a lot of money, but still they suffered from the same fate, although to a lesser extent, as the SPD and the FDP on election day. Whereas the AfD, BSW, and Die Linke, they only launched or published a few or less than 300 ads in total, but still they had massive reach online. I think a special case, a case study we should delve in a little bit deeper is Die Linke, because Die Linke was a dead man walking party at the end of 2024. Nobody would have predicted that Die Linke would finish this race with almost 9% on election day. There was something going on in the raw data of the pollsters, but I think everybody was quite a little bit surprised that Die Linke really managed to get almost 9% on election day. Behind their success was a very, very smart strategy. They focused on simple messages online and offline. They focused on their core issues and especially on something called race-class narrative, something the Harris-Walz campaign had employed less successfully or used less successfully during the US election. They had an issue canvassing strategy. So immediately after the European election, they started to train local messengers, community organizers, in order to make them ready for a snap election. So they basically mobilized the entire party infrastructure in their strongholds or their key districts. And they also set up a new tech tool, a ground management tool, in order to support their mass organizing, and to build this large-scale canvassing campaign. They also built different apps, and we call them citizen-centric political tech tools. So they presented themselves as servants of the working class. They basically developed tools that improved the everyday life of the common folks. So a heating and rent cost, heating check and rent cost check app. And that helped them a lot, building trust with people whilst knocking on doors. So it was like a door-to-door campaign assisted by very smart tech solutions. Die Linke is also a force to be reckoned with online, not just offline. Heidi Reicheneck got almost 30 million views with just one speech in the Bundestag right after Friedrich Merz's move in the Bundestag, where the CDU tried to pass a bill to restrict migration, which then fired back to some extent. And Reicheneck exploited that in a really, really smart way. She did something which usually the AfD is best at. She gave a speech primarily for social media. So this speech was raw, authentic, and the audience was not the parliament, it was mainly social media. And that helped Die Linke to build up this social media momentum. What is also special about Die Linke is that in a similar fashion, or in a way that the AfD has organized itself online, Die Linke has started to become like another challenger party, partly removed from centrist political discourse. They have very few weak ties to other political parties online, and this is represented by the network graph there. This is a network constructed based on the followings of Die Linke MDBs, the new MDBs, and they primarily follow media of one, alternative media sources, video clippers like Nur der Koch, or left-wing influencers. They don't share the same media environment with the rest of the political center. For example, the Greens and the Social Democrats, their most followed media source is Der Spiegel, whereas for Die Linke, it is Das Neue Deutschland, a hyper-partisan outlet, as well as Jacobin and Die Taz. The German election was also fought on different digital battlegrounds as a result of an increasingly fragmented digital space. So we have the social media platforms, which have become anti-social media platforms because they are no longer about follower networks and no longer about engaging with your followers. But there are a lot of people who, or very few people who produce content, and the majority of users, they primarily consume online, especially on TikTok and YouTube. We also have live streams and surge in podcast activity online. So a lot of politicians went on different podcast shows. For example, Ungescripted by Ben, Maximilian Krah from the AfD was the first mover, and then Gregor Gysi, Sarah Wagenknecht, Christian Lindner, and also Julia Klöckner went on that show. We also saw a notable rise in dark socials activity. Dark socials are messengers, Snapchat, etc. Political parties also used banners and Google ads, and also there was a lot of newsletter activity out there. And I think one main reason why we see such a surge in digital activity is that we all spend way too much time on our smartphones, and we really like to consume 916 content. As a result, it's more difficult than ever to make sense of what's out there during a campaign. So you might ask, but what about, you've talked a lot about social media, but what about AI? From our point, it wasn't the AI election, not yet, maybe in 2029. AI was certainly in the toolbox of many political parties, but it was not in the spotlight. We saw chatbots, we saw AI-generated images, we saw some videos, for example, Christian Lindner and you, copywriting activity for sure, fake influencers like Larissa Wagner, a far-right AI influencer affiliated with Compact News, a right-wing extremist, hyper-partisan media outlet. We also saw Markus Söder in a very unique style as Iron Man. And we also saw a lot of cheap fakes, but mainly produced by partisan activists. Yet, political tech played a key role in navigating the complexities of the digital sphere, sometimes assisted by AI. And I think most of these political tech innovations were built by civil society actors. We saw political tech tools in action in the form of AI-powered voting applications like Wahlomat on steroids, Realomat, Electomate, but also WahlChat. We saw social media monitoring tools like the project Sparta mentioned before, real-time social media analysis tool for everyone, built and hosted by Project Sparta of the University of the Federal Armed Forces. There was a lot of great data journalism, which I would also label as political tech innovation. And there was an AI and political ad tracker set up and built by Fabio Botta and Simon Kruszynski. Still, some parties also began experimenting with new tools, but I'd say under the radar. And I'm really looking forward to what our panelists will bring to the table. And that's it. Thank you. And Joseph, I yield the floor. Have fun with our esteemed panelists.
Many thanks, Benjamin. Thank you for those insights and also for those impulses. I think there's a lot to look at. So let me go to our panelists and let me introduce who will be speaking to you and with you tonight. Let me start with Leila Rifahi. She is the head of social media of the CDU Germany and has been running these operations also in the recent federal election campaign. Good evening and welcome, Leila.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Then in alphabetical order, it's Nicolas Schwendemann, who is the managing director of Ressourcenmangel, which is an agency that communicates for 5 German ministries. He was involved with the campaigns of the German Greens in the past, had no recent role in the campaign, but what he has is a great newsletter that you can subscribe to. So welcome, Nicolas. Great to have you as well.
Thanks for having me.
Philipp Burkhardt, who's also with us. Thank you, Philipp. He's the CEO of Universum AG. The Universum is the tech agency, the in-house tech agency of the German Liberals, the FDP. And Philipp is also the chief information officer of the party. The company not just works in Germany, but also for liberal parties across Europe. Welcome, Philipp.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And of course, last but not least, we have with us tonight Tim Hermann. Tim has been a strategic advisor to the recent campaign of the SPD, the German Social Democrats. In the past, in 2021, he was the head of the campaign of the SPD. A warm welcome to you as well, Tim.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get things started. So Benjamin has said that there has been some things happening under the radar. Now, of course, we are all aware that some of the things that we would like to know about are sensitive. But of course, as much as you can share tonight and giving us insights and glimpses into the machine rooms of the political parties, we would much appreciate. So Benjamin has said stuff has happened on the radar. Now, of course, we all know that even though some people expected it, the federal election came early. So I think for starters, I would be very much interested in what did this mean for the tech game? What does this mean for the social media campaign that you were responsible for, that you observed? Leila, if I may start with you, if that's okay. Of course, the CDU has won the election, as we all know, but perhaps you can take us back to the time when suddenly there was the election called. And you had to put up a campaign and you had to organize everything. So can you take us back to the time and give us perhaps some insights into how the campaign went from your perspective? And also, of course, what tools you perhaps used for that. Leila, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So due to the intensity of the election campaign and also to the limited time we had for the preparation of the election, we didn't really have the time and we didn't adopt new tools who could revolutionize the process and who can change everything. But a key strategy for us was mainly to activate the pre-political sphere. So we tried to engage with all our members, we tried to engage with all the association we had, all the supporters we had. We did a lot of live formats to enable them to communicate on their own. So for us, it was really, really special that we could communicate with our big channels we had with the CDU and Friedrich Merz, but we also wanted to create a ground sound around the campaign who could push our narratives on the supporters. So we talked to them, we had different live formats, we even built a website where they could download pictures, talking points, everything you need to do to communicate and to do your own campaign. And this was a key for us to enable them and even to get them to do their own communication. And I remember when I was doing my master thesis in 2021, the election campaign, the Bundestagswahl 2021, I was researching on how first-time voters are being influenced by political personalizations communications. And one thing I find, and other scientists also found out, was that the information you get when it's being shared by your friends and families is much more powerful than when you get it just like that in organic feeds. Knowing that and taking this into account, you can conclude that your content has to be very, very shareable. So it has to be very authentic. It has to be very, very easy, very simple. But also the other conclusion you might have is that you have to enable your community and you have to enable your supporters to communicate on their own, so you can reach the social circles you might not be able to reach on your own. So this was a key for us in our campaign to enable the supporters among us and to create a ground sound around the campaign.
Thanks very much, Leila. You said, of course, due to the early election, you couldn't really, change anything about your tools and about your tech stack. I think that probably applied to most of the political parties that we're having here, but looking forward to hearing from the others. Can you give us a little bit of an insight, kind of what, in your daily or weekly routine, what kind of tools are you using? What are you working with when it comes to social media management, when it comes to social listening? Are those in-house built tools? Are those third-party tools that you use, that you license? Can you give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yes, so we had a third license software where you could do social listening. So you could find out about how your narratives, how your topics were being perceived in the network. And we did that, we had a weekly reporting where you could see, okay, this is how different topics are being received, and this is how our politicians are being received. And we also had a tool where we could see how our content was performing. So we sat down every day and watched the numbers, and then based on the numbers, we could see what was going very good and what might be what needed a bit more communication. So this was basically the tools we used for social media communication in order to improve our communication online.
Thanks. When you look at communicating online and managing social media, what's your biggest pain as a political party? Or if you look back at the campaign, what has been the most painful thing that you had to face?
I wouldn't say a painful thing, but a major task was community management. So you had to really deep dive into the comments. You really had to, there were a lot of comments. You couldn't answer them all, but you wanted to answer a lot of comments. And this was a big task for us. We had a lot of communication managers, and we gained even more because we saw this was a big task for us and we need to be stronger with that. And yeah, this was a major task, which was heavy work for us. Yes.
Thanks for sharing that. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for those first thoughts. Tim, if I may continue with you, the SPD has tried some new things, has succeeded with some things on the digital sphere. So perhaps can you also take us back to when the campaign started, what situation you faced, and then also it would be great, of course, to get some insights into the SPD's tech stack and the tools and what you learned from that. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, I can relate to many of the things that Leila has just mentioned. I think although there was a certain possibility for the government to collapse, or for the governing coalition to collapse in November of 2024, and although all the parties have always been very clear on being ready to campaign at any time, I think in the end, all of the parties were a bit surprised about the spontaneity of this campaign suddenly happening. And there was some debate in November even when the actual election date will be. There were some who advocated for an election day in January, even others were more on the side for February or March. And in the end, I think everyone was just focused on this February date for the election and pretty much focused on making the must-haves happen, because in every election there are a few things that you absolutely need to have. There's no debate about that, and these these things, especially in Germany, we have this unique thing maybe that I don't see very often in other countries in Europe, that you have these big billboards everywhere in Germany. So if you're on the street in a German election cycle, you can't not see these big billboards because they're virtually everywhere, and they're the most or the cheapest medium for advertising in German elections. And this just takes a lot of time. And so making this happen and making these basics and these must-haves happen will probably have impeded the development of revolutions, as Leila has said. However, one thing that I have noticed about this election in 2025 from an SPD perspective was that it has really enabled us to professionalize on some of these aspects that we have started in 21. So that have really kicked off back then, that had their successful start, but that then needed to be redeveloped and developed further. And one interesting aspect for me was this this mobilization infrastructure that we actually put up. So we have 360,000 members across the country who, in our view, are our most important multipliers. They are the ones who bring the campaign to the streets. They are the ones who knock on doors. They are the ones who talk to people in front of the shops and in the city centers and so on. And what we tried to do there with technology was to really enable them to always have the assets that they need, to always have the messages that they need, and to know where to go and where to knock on doors. So one important thing that we had there was a mobilization planner. That's what we called it, where we combined several data sets that we had from 2021 and from the European elections campaign, and where we saw that SPD has a certain potential, because we know that people live in a certain residential area and in a certain quarter that have voted for SPD in 2021, but who haven't voted for SPD in 2024 in the European elections, thus concluding that there must be a certain kind of potential there, that there must be a base for us to talk to them. And so we equipped our people with the necessary data and with the location data and with the geo data to actually go there and knock on doors and talk to people and try to convince them to firstly go vote, use their vote and head to the polls on 23rd of February. And secondly, also provide them in a door knocking app with like questionnaires, for example, to just give them something to make them feel more comfortable going around and knocking on doors and talking to strangers, and to just give them a few example questions of how to talk to people, what to ask them, how to lead a conversation so that it doesn't become obnoxious or uncomfortable in any kind of way. And so this was one important thing that we did, and that we used technology for, also developing it in-house, combining the data sets that we had, using external technology to merge together with what we have in-house, and then moving forward with that. Another aspect that I'd quickly like to mention would, for example, be looking at tour planning, something that happens very much under the radar, and that is also not something that you can talk about in big interviews and that you can have shiny keynotes about, but something very important, because the question when we send our chancellor candidate on a tour all across Germany, we need to ask ourselves, where should we send him? What's our potential area? Where do we have an area where we can tell a story? Where do we have the people to whom we want to talk? And so we actually took a look at these data sets where we see our potential areas, where we see matches to our political priorities, and plan the tour and plan the locations for our advertising billboards and for everything that we have in the physical world, to really match those potential areas and go there. So maybe just these two aspects to start with, apart from everything that we have with video production and camera to cloud streaming and live streaming and so on. But many things have happened there that are not really revolutionary in any way, but that still need to be professionalized over the long term. And I think that's something that all the parties have in common that they're on a journey basically to really develop or to professionalize their strategies with the help of new tools and technology.
Thank you. What about the social listening that Leila also mentioned? How did you go about that? How did you make sense of what's out there, what people are talking about? What was your approach there?
We actually worked together with an external service provider there, who was actually UK based, and my first thought was, how is that supposed to work exactly? To have an agency in the UK who then provides us with social listening insights. However, what I found interesting was that with the help of like AI tools and automatic translation, they could basically fine-tune their systems to just crawl through the networks, get an overview of what people are talking about, what the main debates are, and then summarize it on their side from their perspective, and provide us with the insights that then match our German reality again. So really being able to use technology there, and in their case, they used the Brandwatch suite. So everything that this technology has to offer to just get an overview of what's happening online and in the social networks, but then also provide us with the necessary information that we need to fine tune our campaign and our message, and to see how the other ones are doing and where we need to put an emphasis to really get through.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks for the insights. So I want to come back to that, but before I come to Nicholas, I want to talk with Philip about the FDP. Speaking about in-house developments, of course, you are CEO of the, as I said, in-house agency of the FDP. So perhaps you can also give us some insights once again how the campaign unfolded from a technological point of view, and what digital tools you also used and utilized, and what you learned from it.
Yeah, first of all, I think we're currently in this reflection phase. Obviously, sharing best practice as a member of the Liberal Party at this current state is really hard to do. I think it's always much easier if you win an election to tell a story. But on the other hand, as we all know, you do wrong things in elections that run the right way for you, and you do good things in elections that go horrible for you. So I'd like to focus on the things that I think work for us also more on the long run. I think Tim mentioned the hassle to set things up in the election, and I think one of our strongest points was that we didn't stop a lot of our operations. So we have a basic set of data operation. I think the same holds true for the others. And sometimes the party management ask, can we shut that down in peace times? But I think it's a good thing to never stop a machine like that, so that you have it always on. And if you jump into an election campaign, you have that ready, and that holds true for data operations. That holds also true for all the tools that you want your members to be engaged with, because onboarding members within a really short campaign is super, super hard. So our strategy is to working with the same tools over the long run to bring up adoption rate within the membership month by month, and then have a wide usage base within our members for the basic tools to get the latest news, but also to find the best spots to talk to people, to bring in this information in the same way as the other colleagues did that as well. So I think the most important lesson is to never stop those basic operations, and to continuously work so that you make them a real fit for the culture of your organization. So I think that's one of our strongest takeaways. Besides that, as an IT guy, I like to build new things, and we always were in the mood to bring in new tools. I think Benjamin showed our AI video tool, where users were able to upload their own picture. We used AI to build an AI model of them and turn that into a short video that we then interacted with a video where Christian Lindner is speaking, and you could choose your own policy. I think that was a nice engagement tool because, as Leila said, the relevance to the individual member is important. And if you create a social media piece that it's theirs, they will be able to share that as a WhatsApp status, bring that into the dark social channels. I think that's something that worked out nicely. It didn't help us in the end, as you have seen, but we liked it a lot, and we've seen that it has a lot of traction. And the second thing that we worked on for, I think now 2 years, we're able to introduce it for the first time, was that we had really like an AI chatbot that we trained over 2 years with all the internal documents that we have, that we publicized. And it was like widely used on our website by potential voters to just check it out and see how the FDP is on specific policy issues. But it was also used widely by our own people, because they have a hard time explaining what we did in this government. They have a hard time explaining what our core policy is sometimes. And AI, if it's trained well, is really able to help people delivering text that is suitable for a better, easier to understand communication. So I think that is something that didn't change the election. Now, obviously, I think we were the only party to do that on the national stage. I think the CDU tried it in North Rhine-Westphalia with a lot of their members, if I'm informed correctly. But I think this will change a lot on the long run. Community management, for example, you can do in a much easier way if you have drafts that are written by AI, and if you do that trustworthily and do that transparently, I think that can help to better communicate politics. And in the end, we failed on that because the voters didn't give us enough trust. But I think what we did technology-wise was rather good move there.
Thank you. So if I heard you correctly, you said that you experimented with AI, as Benjamin said, right under the radar, some things, but also above the radar with the AI chatbot and the video tool. And you said community management will be made much easier potentially with AI. So do you think that AI will be embedded in those kinds of platforms, also in political parties? Will this be mainstreamed from your perspective, when it comes to the next election in
I think
2029?
absolutely it will be mainstream because it helps in so many ways. I think for us as a society, it's important to make that in a good way, in a transparent and trustworthy way, because trust is obviously like the most important thing that we have in politics. And if you undermine trust because people don't know what's authentic and what's not, then that's obviously like super dangerous for your reputation. So I recommend looking there really closely what you can use. But in the old times, you had to write a letter to your member of parliament and ask him questions. And then weeks later, someone sent an answer. And sometimes it was really like the standard template they replied with. Sometimes they took their time to answer it. And nowadays, it's just like the results that come out from these systems, if they are trained by the right documents, is really, really good and enables also parties to answer more specifically to the questions of the users. So I think that will be a standard, absolutely. Do I think that it's like changing the digital politics overall? There are like some people doing keynotes about like this is a change, not a shift in strategy, it's a completely new strategy. Now, I think that's honestly bullshit, because it transforms a lot of things, it makes a lot of things easier to make them more convenient. But in the end, you have to win elections and have to gain the trust of the people. And if you fail on that, you see that even clearer than if you win that.
Thanks very much, Philip. Much appreciated also your insights. So, Nicholas, you have a kind of an outsider-insider perspective. An outsider perspective as of course, an advisor and a consultant, but also an insider perspective as you have been involved in the past with campaigns. So, looking at the overall tech game that you saw from all political parties, but perhaps with a special focus on the Greens. What can you tell us? And can you also give us a little bit of a review what happened actually over the few months that the campaign lasted. Over to you, Nicholas.
Yeah, I think I can add on what Carl has said, that technology is not only about implementing new tech set, but it's about making it fit to the cultural setting in which you're using it. And that probably points to the fact that it usually takes longer than 12 weeks to implement a new technology. And that's why we probably didn't see a lot of innovation during this campaign. With the Greens, I still can remember we implemented a new tax set in actually 2019 for the European elections, with the idea to test and try out and then use it in the next federal election. And probably that has really helped, not for 21, but for now. They're still using mostly that tech set, and I think it's publicly, you can see that they're using Action Network from the outside. So that's an off-the-shelf technology from the States. That's the same technology the Democrats are using. Harris campaign has been using it. It's run from within the states, but with a sort of a board of people from different organizations. So it's not only for profit, but run by the people who use it, which is kind of interesting, I think, for the tech model. And it obviously has helped them at the right phase in the campaign, just when the coalition broke down, to have that momentum of Team Habeck, where they signed up a lot of people, and following that, and that's probably one of the biggest successes of the campaign, to have the fundraising game really going strong. They raised over, I think, 10 million with small donations, which is huge in comparison to what they have been doing before. And it would be interesting to learn from the others what their experience was with small donations. But that has been probably the biggest innovation during that campaign. Looking from the outside, maybe there's more from people close to the campaign who are probably in the audience as well. That was interesting, I think. And the other interesting thing, which is probably not so much about technology, but more the foggy surroundings of small groups on different social networks who help to push, and that's for all the campaigns, who help to push the campaigns themselves, be it, I don't know, women against Merz, the neoliberale Aktion, Merz Revolution, and how they're all called, that made it a little bit more foggy to really, and muddy to see what's going on there. But that was, I think, different to elections before, or to campaigns before, because that has been professionalized, as I mean, Leila pointed out right at the beginning, that was part of the strategy, obviously.
Thanks, Nicholas. You mentioned that the digital fundraising, and I would also then hand over to the other ones and understand kind of how the parties go about that. But the digital fundraising has been very successful on the creating revenue, so to say, side. As Benjamin has pointed out, right, the Greens have put a lot of ads online and have spent a lot of money, and from the graphs we could interpret that a lot of money was burned, and money didn't really change the game. And if we look at of course, the Harris and Trump campaigns, then the Democrats also outspent the Republicans, but still lost the election. So what is it about money? Would you say? Would you say money is not as important, as we heard, as organic reach, or does it still matter to have the full bank account and to be able to outspend the others? What would you say?
Problem is, you never know what would have happened if you didn't spend the money. So half of your marketing budget is always wrong. The problem is you don't know which half. But they really outspend the others by huge amounts. I think they spend around 2 million for their main account and for Robert Habeck account. The SPD, I think 1/10, around 250,000. So that's huge, and that's interesting because they obviously had completely different strategies here. Would be interesting to see why the SPD, CDU decided to not spend so heavily. Probably for the SPD, I could imagine they relied more on classical channels. And yes, they tried to do a lot there. Looking at these numbers, it's always also in comparison to the AfD. I think it's interesting to see that they had also a strategy of small accounts and pushing ads out with small accounts, at least to some degree. So these comparisons often do not take this into account. Yeah, but obviously there were completely different strategies out there. What from looking at the ads the Greens were putting out there, it was a lot of sort of organic material, not advertising designed to tell a great story, but more the casual, there's a politician who talks to you kind of content. And that might be one of the points why it hasn't been shared that widely in comparison to more classical ad stuff or viral content that is then being pushed with paid media.
Thanks.
And probably, I don't know, that's also wild guessing. I mean, money came in, they had to spend it.
Thanks. We're halfway through now, and I want to bring the audience in soon. So prepare your questions. You can raise your hand, and then we will bring you in. Before that, 3 quick points. Of course, we could spend all night long discussing about each one, but 3 things that you mentioned, Nicholas, and that I want to also ask the others about: ad spend and decision on where to spend where to spend the money, and related to digital fundraising. So where do you spend the money, but also how do you create the money, and how successful do you think you are? And then the other stuff is about the socials and the dark socials. Nicholas mentioned the role of influencers, of smaller accounts, in getting people and voters mobilized on TikTok, on other socials. So perhaps let's quickly do a round on the how to create revenue digitally, fundraising, and how to spend it. Who wants to say something on that? Tim.
Yeah, maybe I can start because I think it's an interesting topic, because especially this meta ad library is always the center of attention in an election campaign. Everyone's always keen on finding out who's spending how much on the meta platforms. And then you have these graphs where you see that the Greens are outspending everyone else, and the CDU and the SPD are not spending enough, and people are speculating whether or not they have already given up, when in fact, obviously, the meta platforms are only one aspect of digital campaigning. And especially for the SPD, for example, one focus for us was display advertising and advertising on the Google platform and on YouTube and so on, with video content and so on. And none of that appears in the meta ad library. Also, obviously, our target audience was probably older than what the Greens were targeting. Especially SPD and CDU have a strong target audience in the older demographic, at least much older than Robert Habeck, to say for sure. And so just putting your money on Instagram and Facebook didn't just do the job for us. And that's why most of what we spent in this election didn't show up in the meta ad library, which didn't mean that we didn't spend anything on digital campaigning. The only thing was that it was probably not just amplifying posts on Facebook and Instagram, although of course we were present there and we did push what we had. Fundraising was also an interesting topic for us, because that was a very positive surprise in my opinion, that 2025 was probably the most successful year yet for fundraising for the SPD. We're not popular for getting big donations historically. However, the thing that I mentioned earlier with the professionalization of campaigning led to a situation where especially our team that was responsible for fundraising has learned a lot from the 2021 campaign, has learned a lot from the 2024 European elections, and so was really able to fine-tune its funnel for email marketing. Also, not a very shiny topic to talk about emails, and people are always wondering, is email really the 21st century communication channel? But for some cases, and especially for fundraising, it's just very effective, and you can see it in the data that emailing people and asking them for money with a bit more text and with an argument is just very effective to get you small donations. And so this is something that we emphasized in our campaign, and that was very successful, in fact. The third aspect that you mentioned was dark social. And I always don't like this term of dark social because it has this sinister vibe of being something that's a bit sketchy. While in my opinion, it's just a translation of very classical campaigning. There's only limited efficiency and effectiveness in a party telling people that what a certain party is doing is great stuff. There's no surprise in that. Nobody will be easily convinced by the SPD telling them how the SPD is doing a good job. It becomes more interesting when other people are talking about our message. And in my view, this is something that parties have always tried to achieve, to have a message that's so strong that other people will start talking about that. And of course, we need to enable these people to talk about that by supplying them with messaging, by supplying them with easily shareable things. Leila, you said earlier that these things need to be shareable, these social assets. I would add they also need to be available. People need to know where to find them and how to share them and what to say about them and how to talk about them. And so supplying people with these kinds of assets and with everything that they need to share and spread our campaign. Some people will call it dark social because it's something that doesn't happen on our official channels. I would say it's just a digital translation of very classical campaigning mechanisms that we want to apply.
Thanks, Tim. Can you tell us kind of which socials or which messages does the SPD or has the SPD used in the campaign? WhatsApp, Signal, Facebook Messenger? What are you working with? Everything?
Yeah, in that case, it was a Signal, mostly Signal. Yeah. So we had people who signed up to help with the campaign, just offered them to join a certain group, and then kept them updated throughout the campaign, telling them what will happen next, what our main messages will be, what kind of content we will release, and thus enabling them to help us in our campaign and to amplify the images that we have. Because we also know that especially on the social media platforms, the algorithms limit our reach. Benjamin mentioned it earlier that there is this invisibility of moderate opinions. I think that's no coincidence, but these platforms amplify what's particularly shrill, particularly entertaining, particularly emotional. And if you have a moderate opinion, then you still have to ask yourself how you can make it entertaining. However, there will always be a disadvantage with that, and you need help.
Thank you, Philip. Keywords were digital fundraising, ad spending, and socials.
Yeah, I would like to continue what Tim just said because it's steering a little bit into the direction of regulation. I absolutely share what Tim said about the algorithms that are trimmed for specific positions. And curiously, like the regulation that we face, because now spending money on Facebook, spending money on Instagram or Google is highly regulated and will become close to illegal, maybe also this year, or practically not available because the platform suppliers see that the regulation is so burdensome that they will just stop offering those services. And I think we are only looking into the direction of the ad spending, and it's really good that we have all the transparency libraries But the key problem is much deeper than just the ad spending, because if the organic content is also like trimmed to be in a specific kind, then this might be the larger problem than the question of how much money did you spend there. And on a further note, so I think we have to discuss where politics can take place in future, because if it's banned in the digital world, also billboard regulations getting tighter and tighter. You can't put your leaflet in the letterbox if someone says, I don't want to have any advertisement. So there are fewer places where parties can bring in their message to the people. And I think we really need to start a discussion about where does this conversation then takes place, because people not tend to watch the Tagesschau every night. They are not really overly politicized. So the people who are not so in touch with politics, where do they get their information from in an election campaign? I think this is something that is interesting to follow. And final remark, obviously, like if you spend money on Google and if you spend money on Meta, this is published. If you buy them directly at a newspaper outlet, this isn't published because it's not going into the transparency library. And data journalism sometimes makes it easy or makes itself too easy because it just works with available data. And then the journalism is about what is available and not about what is not available. Maybe the same problem that we also face with social listening, because obviously if you want to fine-tune your social media campaign, social listening is great because, as Leila said, then you have an instant feedback loop and can build that. But sometimes also politicians nowadays ask, what do people think about? And then we say, okay, we have a social listening tool. We provide some insights, but then we only provide the insights to the data streams that are openly available. That's not what's happening on Telegram. That's not what's happening on the kitchen table. So politicians sometimes are also sidetracked because they are really not able to really understand the limitations of social listening and other data sources that we supply, even if you put a little asterisk onto that and say, be careful. They won't.
Thanks very much. Leila has raised her hand already, so I will give, of course, the word to you. And then I would like to bring in the audience. There have already been some questions posted. Thanks, David Chalmers, for posting already some questions. So you can of course raise your hand as well. Then I can bring you in. Or you post it in writing. So please do participate. Let us know what you're interested in. That we have 30 minutes. But before that, Leila, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I fully agree with Tim and also with Philip regarding the impact of online advertising. So given the aspect that our voter base tends to be a bit older, we did not rely solely on Meta, but also leveraged our advertising in television, display ads, as Tim also mentioned it, and also traditional media. And yeah, so, and also to dive into the influencer aspect, we also engaged in this strategy. Friedrich Merz met with influencers, and also other politicians met with influencers. And we could also see that other parties were doing it. I don't have to mention every influencers they met, but what is crucial for that, I just wanted to add this, for the CDU, this was a relatively new territory. And now moving forward, I think it's very crucial for everybody to further develop and to expand these efforts, these relationships that were gained with new influences, and not only for the CDU, but for everyone. So we don't get to wake up in 2027 and have to develop a new relationship to everything. So it's very, very crucial to build now a strong relationship and to even empower it, so to be able to do a very good campaign in the next years.
Thanks very much, Leila. With that, I come to the questions that have already been posted. So I would like to ask everyone but Tim, because he's already answered it. What about data-driven canvassing? What about door-to-door campaigning? It's still something that in many European countries is a bit of an exception or an outlier, or something that is still seen a little bit, you know, not European, if I may call it like that, but rather kind of Anglo-American. So to the CDU, the FDP, and to Nicolas, from your perspective, also, you know, regarding the Greens, do you see that data-driven campaigning, like the Linke has done very successfully, apparently, is something that your parties, if I may call it like that, should do more of? That's the first question. And then the second question from Klaas Jan, referring to Nicolas' comment about we don't know what happened if we hadn't spent the money. What about field experiments to quantify the effect of specific campaigning efforts? Is that something that is going on? Is it something that's just not being talked about? Or is this something that's just not happening enough? So first of all, SPD, CDU, Greens, data canvassing, can you learn from the Linke? Is this something where you've been lacking in the past? Philip, can I start with you?
I can start with the field experiment
Yes.
thing, because actually I think, Klaas-Jan, it's absolutely true that it's under-researched. Maybe we look into the wrong kind of corners there, but I don't think the effectiveness is really measured well, especially in Europe. So there are some things we tried. We especially went with digital fundraising. Tim mentioned how strong email marketing is, and we really optimize these messages because it's easy to handle the data here. I know that Frédéric Fayet, a professor working at the University of Münster, is doing some great research regarding the effectiveness of different messages with canvassing. So this is something where we worked him in a small experiment. Sorry, but still. I would be supporting Nicolas with his 50-50 rule. I think that's the best knowledge we have, historically speaking, and the data research is really not done that well when it comes to effectiveness of campaigns.
Leila, what about canvassing, door-to-door knocking? Is this something that the CDU is doing, wants to do more of? Do you think there is a potential?
So I'm not speaking for my my Abteilung right now, but we are doing it. We're doing it very actively, and we still can do more. That's for sure. I want to go to the social listening tool, maybe also regarding that. Also, what Philip said. What was very not shocking, but surprisingly, is that also the social listening tools have something that you can get an alarm when they tell you there is something coming, might be like a shitstorm or anything. Every alarm that was in the election campaign didn't come from the social listening tool, but came from our supporters and from people who are online. And maybe Tim can agree with that, and the others also. So the tool was very good. We were working very, very fine, but everything which was about to go big and which was a bit dangerous for us was effectively seen by supporters or by our own, and not by the platform. We saw that the platform was doing 1 hour after, they were telling us, maybe there's something coming, and we were just yes, we know because we saw it, and somebody already told us. So I think those social listening tools are great to get a long-term insight on how narratives are being perceived, but there is still much to do when it comes to rapid response and to being very quick to answer different themes which are online.
Thank you. And the other question was in terms of evaluating certain measures or certain interventions that you try, and also of the ad spend. Is there some kind of systematic effort? Are there kind of experiments being run? Do you work with someone? Do you do this in-house? Or is it something where you just rely on, Google Stats and other analytics?
We have it a bit mixed. We have people who work in-house, but we also have from our agency staff who came with us, and now we're looking and evaluating the process.
Thanks. Nicolas, as you were mentioned explicitly, do you know whether the Greens are evaluating, their ad spend and looking at how to adapt in the future?
I guess they do. Yes, when you spend 2 million, you hopefully have some mechanism in place to test what you're doing. And I mean, probably everybody is doing some sort of A/B testing and having a larger set of ads out there, and then keeping those running who are running the best, who have the best reach and so forth. So think so. Yes. Of course they do, and I would always advise to have that kind of testing in place, because sometimes the most absurd things go well, and the things you think of as being great, they don't work out at all. That's I think always something we'd need to do. But at the same time, I'd agree with Carl, who said that there's lots of space for improvement, I think, for all of us in all campaigning, because we still we talk about campaigns in various meetings a lot, and we theorize them instead of just going out there, pushing it out and see what happens, because we still try to be on the side of taking the least amount of risks that's possible and things like that. So I think there's a lot of room to improve for all political campaigns in testing and improving on the way.
Thanks. And in terms of canvassing, I mean, the Linke has knocked 69,000 doors in Lichtenberg alone, and I think probably they took some voters from the Greens as well, right? So do you see a push towards canvassing? Is there an interest in scaling those operations? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we're talking about canvassing together for, I don't know, 10, 15 years now in Germany, and all parties are trying to push it. And the Linke seems to have found a way to do it, that it works for them really good. Last year, I was doing a campaign in Saxony where they really strategically tried to win a direct mandat because they knew they needed it. And they pushed out a lot of people. They had teams on the ground and all the things you want to do, and they're doing it there. And obviously they found a way how to do it for the Linke, and the others are still searching a way to do it themselves. The Greens are trying. I didn't see a lot of success cases during the last campaign. Didn't see a lot of success cases besides those from the Linke, who really strategically went into certain districts where they knew they had potential. And probably that is part of the success, that they bounded to a candidate. The candidate itself was out there going door to door, motivating their teams. That might be one key thing to do there.
If I may add on that, because we work with a series of international liberal customers as well, and our observation is that, like, German parties look at canvassing in the same way they look on billboards, in the sense of, okay, now's the hot election campaign, we bring out our canvassers to the doors and knock doors. And obviously that's better than not doing that. But the parties who do that successfully in Europe on the long run, they go out early. They go out way before the election starts and use it also to a listening tool, as a listening tool, and feeding back this information into party policy, feeding back this information into campaign setups. And I think this requires really a change in culture. We're back to that area again, because now all the parties have the tech stack, but they have people within the party typically who would like to meet up for a beer. That's, if you're a party member, that's how you're elected in the local board. And now we ask the same people to go out, knock on doors, talk to strangers. And I think this is a cultural shock for most parties. That's why it takes so long to transform in the organization, to find the ones within your supporter base who really like that, encourage them, form teams. And this cultural change takes time. And I think this is the way to go for the parties in the democratic center, to reconsider how they bring their members into a mood where they like to do that.
Thank you. A question from Lucas Bramel. Would any of you have been able to see or recognize or even counter on an election interference by other states or other nefarious actors? To raise your hand if you have seen, recognized election interference Or is this something that, because people expected that it would happen a lot, and that Russia and other actors might try to manipulate, and then the stories were that it actually, wasn't as bad as we expected. Any perspectives on that? Not so much then. So you didn't experience direct interference, manipulation, which of course is not the same as it didn't happen, but in your jobs, in your roles, you didn't have to fight it or deal with it. Thank you. Yeah, that's I think that's interesting as well. From Clinton Dupré, to what extent did parties here engage in face-to-face persuasive conversations? That's another canvassing question. So the Linke once again has been very successful in doing that. Do you have the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure? Do you have the tools to actually know what you should talk about with a certain person, to record that? Of course, there are apps for that as well. Macron did it back in the day with En Marche, to record tens of thousands of conversations, and then back in the day without AI, try to analyze and make sense of the flood of information. So can you give us a quick feedback or insight? Do you have an app for that? That's the question.
In our case, yes, there is an app. It's this app that gives you a little bit of inspiration of what to talk about. However, there's also this feedback channel. And sometimes when there are questions where we don't want to record anything, but it's just about talking to people and giving them the sign that we're open to talk, then the question also implies do not record. But sometimes we want this feedback, and I agree with what's already been said, that in the future I think this must be a process that's much more closely woven into the political process. So really talking to people outside of election times and using their feedback to work politically and to listen and to develop policies that actually match people's needs and worries, and not using it just as a campaigning tool, but as a, if you will, pre-campaigning tool. And I think that's the next development step for us. And I think you're absolutely right that AI will be a game changer there, because the more data you collect there and the more insights and intel you gather, the more help you need to actually categorize it and make something out of it that's comparable and where you see clusters and so on. And with that, technology can really help.
Thank you. Nima is asking regarding new multimodal data sets. Of course, some parties are already using multimodal models with geospatial data integrating with other kind of data sets. How much do you think we will see over the next couple of years in terms of enriched data, making sense of new multimodal data sets? How much might that change the political game? And of course, in relation or in combination with powering through them with AI and trying to analyze them accordingly. So what potential do you see in those kinds of new data that might be available and that parties might utilize? Philip, if I may start with you.
I think it's super important, especially when we are more and more limited to use the targeting power of social networks. It becomes more and more important to understand geographic distributions, statistical distributions, and to understand what topics are important for the people living in a certain area. So I think that's getting more and more important. And we work with a data model that we work now for 12 years. That takes a lot of data, especially from the microsensors, combines it with the information that we have about voting history in specific districts, and brings that into a model where we can give easy, actionable data to our volunteers. To be super honest about the question of Niam, I'm not super familiar with multi-scale vision language data sets for remote sensing images, so I'm not specifically can't answer what that specifically means. But obviously there are also experiments to use AI to gather more and more data about geography. I know that there are parties around who use satellite images and used image detection to see if they can extract specific geographic features. For instance, is there a pool? Do the people use solar cells on their roofs? So you could extract this information, put it into structured data from a vision AI, and then use it to enhance your data set. But a lot of the time you really need to ask yourselves, where is this heading you? Is this really like gaining the information? Do you talk to a voter with a pool in a different way than you talk to a voter without a pool? Sometimes these things then are proxies, basically, right? If people in a neighborhood tend to have a pool, what do you learn? The neighborhood is kind of wealthy. That's something maybe you can also learn from microcensus data, and you have that more easily available. So I think it's more and more data will be used. AI will be used, is used in targeting information, but there's also a limitation to what you can really transfer into your specific actions with your volunteers. I think the biggest challenge is working with the volunteers and not optimizing the data set at the current state.
Thanks very much. We're entering the last 15 minutes. So we have a question from Elias, and I want to revisit something that I don't think we fully addressed before. Nicholas, you alluded to it, which is the issue of influencers and building networks of strong accounts, which both the Linke and AfD are quite strong in, right? To have powerful individual accounts of mandate holders and party leaders, but then also some organizations and some other influencers who then amplify the message. I know that the SPD has tried some stuff on this, and perhaps also the other ones can say a little bit about this. Is this being developed internally? Is there a strategy of building up stronger networks of accounts, not just the party leader or the channel of the party itself? What are you working on digitally there? Tim, perhaps starting with you at the SPD.
Yeah, who would have thought that Olaf Scholz would become a TikTok star in this election? At least I wouldn't have expected that, but that was pretty much what happened, and it was one of the biggest surprises for me in this campaign. He had already started being present on TikTok as the federal chancellor a few months and years ago, and in this campaign we strategically built upon it, and we actually built these influencer networks based on where there are matches with the issues that these influencers are talking about, and where there are just very basic social media trends that we can use. For example, Olaf Scholz has met with a bus driver who has been very popular on TikTok, who always has these funny hand movements and greets people who enter his bus. And for some reason, he's become popular with that. And we thought, why not just connect him to Olaf Scholz and let him show Olaf this hand movement? And this video alone has created, I think, 3 million views or so. So really doing exceptionally well, especially for a social democratic chancellor candidate. And an interesting thing that we noticed was that as soon as these numbers had gone up, simply and purely through entertainment, without any political messaging in there, the views for our more political and more substantial content also increased, because people started to see Olaf Scholz as this, they called him Olaf Abi, like Olaf the big brother, a big brother who's just there, who gives you a few tips on how to improve your life politically, and just became a very, very popular, friendly figure that people wanted to listen to. And that improved the more substantial content on the long run. There was another influencer Brooklyn, that's what he's called. He has always been talking about, or he has these viral videos where he just says, "Olaf Scholz, lower the prices." That's what his catchphrase was during the peak times of inflation. And we thought, why not connect him to Olaf Scholz? And we invited him to our party conference. And he really appreciated this opportunity to finally meet the federal chancellor, posted a video on his TikTok, and it generated 8 million views, I think. And we were able to also feature it on our account, thus promoting Olaf Scholz as a personality brand and everything that we had to tell about him. And that actually worked very well and showed us that sometimes, even for people who are very focused on substantial and responsible arguments and so on, you need to be brave enough to really get the platform dynamic and see TikTok or different platforms as what they are, which are entertainment platforms mostly and first and foremost. And people come there for entertainment purposes. And if you give them something that's entertaining, things will start to happen, and you will get more attention for your political arguments. And so that was very successful for us.
A quick question, short answer. Now that Lars Klingbeil is heading the SPD, do you think this will become more of a strategy in the future?
I think the success suggests that it should be. And I think we should strategically be working on that, and also enable our political personalities to engage in things that the community wants to see and that they enjoy. And then they will form meaningful connections that enable them to talk to them in different ways. But you need to open a door and take people seriously in the situation where they are on these social platforms.
Thank you. Leila and Nicholas, what about the CDU and the Greens? Is there a strategy in building up those influencer networks? Nicholas, you already mentioned something. Leila, what about the CDU? Yes, older electorate, older membership, but still you need to be out there. You need to engage people.
Yes, of course. This is a strategy for us. It was very new, but we did reach out to new influencers such as Marie Hoffmann. We talked to her. We invited her to our party congress. She even spoke on a panel. And of course, we see that it has to be in the future that we have to reach out to them and that we have to maintain the contact to build a strong relationship. So we have a good movement for the next campaigns that are coming quickly than we think. I think it's one thing to reach out to the influencers who might collaborate with you and who share your narratives, but it's also a thing to actively see what kind of influencers are positioning for yourself. So we had in the last few days Stefan Raab, who did a lot of like videos for each party, for the SPD, FDP, Grüne, and CDU. And for us, he did a very funny video, and we actively talked to him and collaborated with him. And this is one task, not to only reach out, but to see the influencers or the like very prominent people who are in your favor and like talking to them. And for the future, I think it's very important to stabilize this and to maintain this relationship so you have a good fundament for the next elections.
Thank you, Nicholas.
I mean, as I wasn't involved in the campaign, I have only like the perspective from the outside. And of course, people are talking a lot about this issue. And I think they tried out new things. They had these accounts, the Green headquarter. They had accounts that were close to the party, but not really officially supported by the campaign. So you saw that. And I think everybody's building these networks and trying to do more and new things. But that's the limited knowledge I have.
All right. We're running out of time slowly, so therefore, one last question, and I ask you to be very brief, perhaps just with a couple of words. Julius van der Laar asks, which digital campaign management tool, and excluding social media platforms, so which app, which tool did you or your team use most frequently over the 110 days of campaign? Leila, what was the most used tool?
It's very hard to say. I can only talk about my platform tools and my social media team. And we did use Brandwatch a lot for social listening, that's for sure, just like Tim mentioned it before. And what we did use also was the own meta platforms a lot, like because they have a lot of good infrastructure where you can see your own analyzation. So this is what we did, and this was our main tools, yes, for social media.
Thank you. Philip, what was the most used tool?
I think it's really hard to say because thousands of tools. In the end, it's like, I think collaboration is important. So I say we use a collaboration document tool to share all that knowledge and bring everything in. I think that was the most used tool. It's Sebastian Confluence that we're using right there.
Confluence, thank you. Tim, what's the most used tool in your
I would probably
department?
also say Brandwatch and Confluence. So Brandwatch for social listening and Confluence for getting all the documents together, getting all the information together. But I also find it hard to name just one tool that dominates all the other ones because it's always a mix of different tasks and functions and so on.
Thanks. Nicholas, can you say anything about that? Do you have any insights on this?
I was happy to see that they're finally using Action Network and email really extensively, and it obviously helped. But if that was the most used tool, I don't know. Slack probably.
So lots about collaboration, of course, and coordinating in over a very short amount of time, 110 days. We are now a few weeks after the election, and we're coming to the end of this political tech review. Thanks a lot to everyone who participated. Thanks to the speakers. We already are planning for the next event because, of course, as you may have read, Portugal will probably have an early election in May. So we are planning for the next event to be about Portugal and the political tech perspective there. Of course, we're also planning the new political tech summit for 2026, so stay tuned. And in any way, if you haven't already joined the Partisan community, go to partisan.community and do join us. We are rolling this out step by step and building it up together with you. So great to have you. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for your great questions. And as there has been a question on documentation, yes, we have recorded it. And of course, we also will provide a documentation to everyone. Yes, and thank you, Benjamin. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn. So with that, thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening. It's been a great discussion. All the best.